Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Playmakers. What's up, guys? For today's video, it's time for another player versus player comparison, and today I'm going to be talking about some running backs. So the two players I'm going to be comparing in today's video, it's going to be Miles Sanders and David Montgomery. So I'm going to go through each player's ADP, their 2019 season, 2020 season, their 2021 outlook, and then which player I would rather be drafting for fantasy football this year. And just remember, this video isn't for me to tell you guys who to draft. It's definitely not that cut and dry. These players are being drafted close together for a reason. So I'm just going to present all the facts, do as thorough of a breakdown that I can to help you guys make the best decisions for your fantasy teams and to choose the player that you guys are more confident in. If you guys watch this video and you find yourself enjoying the content, please just leave a like and subscribe to the channel. That really helps support me a lot. It helps me more than you guys know. And then also let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. After you watch this video, let me know if you're going to be drafting Miles Sanders or David Montgomery if you're on the clock and you can choose between those two players. Let me know and then give me your reasoning and I'll respond back to you as soon as I can. But let's get into it. So first we're going to talk about their current ADP. So right now Miles Sanders is the RB19 off the board and David Montgomery is the RB20. So going back to back at the running back position. And both of these players have been going as mid to late fourth round picks. And this is using Underdog Fantasy Football's ADP. So obviously very close together. And this is a very realistic spot where you could be up and you have to choose between these two guys. Let's talk about each player's 2019 season. Miles Sanders finished as the RB20 in points per game. And David Montgomery was the RB31 in points per game. For Miles Sanders, this was his rookie season. He was picked 21st in the second round by the Philadelphia Eagles, and he had a really up and down 2019 season. He was given really solid carries at the beginning of the season. He got 10 plus carries in weeks 1 through 4, but averaged under 4 yards per carry and didn't get into the end zone during those games. Then in the next 4 weeks, we saw that usage drop pretty dramatically. He didn't get double-digit carries once in those next 4 weeks. So it kind of seemed like they were leaning the load off of him for sure. But then after those 4 weeks, from weeks 9 through 16, he was really given an established workload. He got 10 plus carries in all of those games and was also very involved in the receiving game. He finished the year with 818 rushing yards. He ran for 3 touchdowns and then also added 50 receptions for 509 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. That receiving role was definitely a big part of his fantasy production. And then he also finished the season pretty well, which made a lot of people feel really solid about him going into the 2020 season. For David Montgomery, he was also in his rookie season in 2019. He was the 9th pick of the 3rd round by the Chicago Bears, and he was given a huge workload on the ground right away. He had 242 total carries on the season, which is very solid, especially for a rookie RB. But he was incredibly inefficient. That was the issue. He averaged only 3.7 yards per carry, which is really, really poor. And then he also didn't get a lot of work in the receiving game. Tariq Cohen basically had that role in the offense locked down. Montgomery finished the season with 889 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, and then 25 receptions for 185 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. So overall, both of these players had some pretty solid rookie seasons. Moving on to 2020, we saw Miles Sanders finish as the RB18 in points per game, and David Montgomery finished as the RB8. For Miles Sanders, this year was definitely a big disappointment on his part. He barely improved on his rookie season despite getting more carries and targets per game. I think a lot of people thought that once he established himself as that workhorse of the offense, his production would really just skyrocket, but it just didn't happen. In 12 games, Sanders rushed for 867 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, and then caught 28 passes for 197 receiving yards. And the receiving work was the huge drop-off from 2019 to 2020. He went from catching 79% of his targets in 2019 to only catching 54% in 2020. And then he also went from 10.2 yards per reception in 2019. That fell to 7 yards per reception in 2020. He also went from 2 drops in 2019 to 8 drops in 2020. And those 8 drops was second worst in the NFL at the running back position. So basically just fell off everywhere in that receiving role. And that was really where he was getting a lot of the upside in 2019. And that's what a lot of people were really excited for in his career. He did put together some solid games towards the end of the season once Hurts took over at quarterback, but it was definitely a small sample size and fairly reliant on getting into the end zone. For David Montgomery, he had a huge 2020 season. He was a fantasy winner for a lot of people. I know he definitely clutched up for me in a lot of my leagues. And in 15 games, he rushed for 1,070 yards, 8 rushing touchdowns, and then caught 54 passes for 438 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. And all of that seems like really solid stuff, and it definitely was, but there were also a lot of factors that kind of created this perfect storm for David Montgomery. The first was that Tariq Cohen's ACL tear was a huge part of his breakout last year. When Cohen was healthy, Montgomery didn't see anywhere close to the same receiving role that he saw last year. Cohen was the clear top receiving back, but when Cohen was gone, he basically handed that role over to Montgomery, and he definitely took advantage of it. Montgomery was also helped out by the Bears' very, very thin running back room. When Cohen went down, they just did not have a lot of options behind him. The second most carries on the team came from Cordero Patterson, who's basically been a wide receiver in his career, but the Bears needed him to play running back because they just didn't really have anyone else who could step in and be the backup. Efficiency and consistency were definitely still issues for David Montgomery. I mean, he was basically locked in as a bust until he went on that crazy run to end the season, and that's really where I took advantage of it. He just had a very weak schedule to end the season, so I was buying him at a very low price just because, like, a lot of these defenses, even subpar running backs, could put up big numbers, and he obviously did, but he still averaged under 4 yards per carry in 7 out of his 15 games. So almost 50% of his games was under 4 yards per carry. And then he also scored 1 rushing touchdown from weeks 1 through 9. So he basically put up all that production in the last few weeks of the season. And that's definitely not ideal for a fantasy running back. I'd much rather have a guy who's going to be consistent throughout the entire season. Now let's look at what I'm expecting from each of these players in 2021. For Miles Sanders, I think there's a lot of potential variation for him this year. I see a path where he could take over as the workhorse back, kind of the role that a lot of people expected him to take over in 2020. But I could also see another path where he's totally tossed into an RB committee and just has a lot less value than people are expecting. With the new coaching staff, no one can really be sure what his usage is going to be. They could go out and give him the workhorse touches, or they could kind of limit him. We just don't know. I'm also just a little bit concerned with the backups that the Philadelphia Eagles have. They have Kenny Gainwell, who is a great receiving back. They got him in the draft this year. Then you also have Jordan Howard, who can be a really solid goal line back. You just kind of have these guys back there that could just eat into Miles Sanders' production in a couple different ways. That's definitely not something I like. Also, Sanders has dealt with multiple different injuries in his 2-year career. He's been banged up in both seasons, so the team may just think it's better to reduce his workload, give him some limited touches where he can be efficient and effective, but also still healthy. So all of that is still up in the air with him this year. For David Montgomery, I mean, he is in for some regression 100% from his 2020 season. I expect that receiving role to definitely decrease. It's probably going to be somewhere between what it was his rookie year in 2019 and what he did in 2020. I think he proved that he's a solid receiving back. He's definitely capable. He can do the job, but Cohen is definitely better, and they also extended Cohen, so they're still definitely going to be using him, and he's still going to be heavily involved. This Bears offensive line is also still very bad, and the team added to their running back room, so he's going to be inefficient still, and he's also going to have some more competition out of the backfield. They signed Damian Williams, who is a very capable backup, and also, like I mentioned, Tariq Cohen is coming back. So just a lot of things kind of not going in Montgomery's favor from 2020 to 2021. Now, if I was on the clock and I had to be choosing between Sanders or David Montgomery, I really think I could be swayed either way. Normally I have a decently solid opinion, but I really don't here. I have them back to back in my rankings. I think I have Sanders at 19, Montgomery at 20, basically exactly what their ADP is. In my opinion, Montgomery is the player with more guaranteed volume. I think the Bears have proven they're just going to feed him the ball on the ground, and I think that continues into 2021. But I also think Sanders has the higher upside, but is also definitely riskier. He has less guaranteed touches, but he also has that receiving potential, and then also he could be given those workhorse touches that Montgomery has. I just think it's less locked in. I really just think it depends on what kind of player you're looking for. Maybe I went running back, wide receiver, and I'm looking for my running back 2. Then I may want David Montgomery just because I think he's a little bit safer. But say I was trying to pick my running back 3 here in the 4th round, then I may want to go with the more higher upside play in Miles Sanders. It really just depends on what you're looking for and who you feel more confident in for 2021. All right, so that is going to wrap it up for the David Montgomery and Miles Sanders player breakdown. Thank you guys so much for stopping by, watching, and listening. Let me know down below, who are you going to be drafting, Miles Sanders or David Montgomery? Let me know your reasoning, and I'll get back to you right away. If you enjoyed the video, also please make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it. But that's all I have for you guys today. I'm going to be putting out another mock draft tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for stopping by, and I'll see you tomorrow.